distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. We are honored to have Mr. Robert van der Boeren with us today, who will speak on open access and application of higher education. Mr. Robert is responsible for the Dutch University's policy on open access, the negotiations with publishers and strategic communications, and international. Without further ado, please join me to welcome the respected speaker, Mr. Robert van der Boeren.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak and to you today, to share the experience and the strategy that we used in the Netherlands to go to open access. Thank you very much for the introduction, and please may I use this opportunity to make a bit of a distinction between open access of scholarly articles and the open science movement. So indeed, open access can be defined as open access to any scholarly outcome. But today I will address the scholarly articles open access. But I would like to say that open science, meaning sharing of research data, sharing of articles, citizen science, is a much broader definition and indeed a very important development. But so today, open access of scholarly articles. I've prepared some slides, and I hope this will lead you through the quest that we've been on over the past 2.5 years in the Netherlands. First of all, a very brief introduction to the Netherlands. It may help you to understand about our nation, how we are organized. So this is very briefly summarized the Netherlands. We have 17 million inhabitants. It's a very dense country. If you drive from north to south by car, it will take you only 4 hours. 41 square kilometers. We're one of the 27 member states in the European Union, and 653 billion euro GDP. So we have 14 research universities. As you can see, the locations on the map of the Netherlands. Let's see, 11 comprehensive universities. One of them I will especially highlight, Radboud University Nijmegen, because I also work for this university on management of research data. On the next slide, you will see that we have 8 university medical centers who have liaison with universities. Then we have 4 technological universities. Wageningen University, very much known for food and agriculture. And 1 university for lifelong learning, specialized in lifelong learning, very important for employment in the Netherlands. To go to the subject of today, open access, I would like to immediately open with our official goal. We want to achieve Gold Open Access by 2020. And to give you an idea about the challenge that we're facing, in 2014 when we started, we were at a percentage of 2% open access, only 2%. So it was definitely not very common in research. We have had a lot of debate about why open access, and I think it would be interesting for you that I share one of the reasons for us to publish in open access. First of all, doing research is all about dissemination. So the concept of open access will provide you better chances to disseminate your work. Now let me take you through quite a recent story in the UK. It's about Professor Daniel Miller. He's a very, very acknowledged professor in social sciences. So he wrote this excellent book about social media and society. So what he did is something that every researcher does. He would very likely publish the book in hard copy. And we know, everybody of us knows, that a book in hard copy is considered to be successful when sold in its lifetime, like in 400 copies. But this person, Daniel Miller, is very much an advocate of open access. So what he did, it was not only to publish it in hard copy, but also in open access, making it freely accessible for each and every person worldwide who has access to the internet. So what happened was that after 3 months, he had 24,000 unique downloads on his book. Can you imagine the impact that it had? So this is exactly what he wanted to achieve. You see the difference, 400 hard copy versions versus 24,000 only in the first couple of months. So open access brings a unique opportunity to share. Of course, access to the internet is an issue in itself. I'm not going to discuss it today, but it is an issue. But for those who have access to internet, open access brings huge opportunities. For us in the Netherlands, we also think about the social impact of open access. We think about citizen science. We think about the implications for what universities can do for economy, to solve nowadays problems. For instance, a nurse in a hospital usually doesn't have the money to access the latest insights on, for instance, pediatrics. They just cannot afford it. But it is very important that they can get to know the latest insights. It's important for their work. Nowadays, scholarly articles are only accessible for very fortunate, rich research institutions who can access. So by providing open access, I think universities can still maintain and support a publishing system, and there is an opportunity for publishers to support it. But we need a different standard. It has to be freely available to anyone. It doesn't mean free of charge. Obviously, someone has to pay for it, otherwise you cannot maintain the system of publishing. So universities can do so. The Gold Open Access refers to a standard of open access which provides immediate open access. It's the opposite of the Green Open Access. You may have read about it, the Green, the Gold Open Access. So Green refers to a situation where researchers can deposit their scholarly article in a trusted repository of their university or a national repository, but they have to keep to limitations that publishers set, because they will publish for impact, for indexation, for impact factor in publisher journals. They will be accessible for others who can afford the subscription agreement. Then they will publish it in their repository, but they will have to stick to embargo periods. They have a varied terms, like from 12 months even to 36. So we just mentioned, it was mentioned that if you have to wait like for 3 months for an article, it's out of date. So embargoes are very much a problem in the Green Open Access solution. So therefore we think that Gold Open Access is the sustainable solution. And internet makes it all possible. We made this open access policy and goals in 2014, summer of 2014. And we had nothing. We didn't have a vision or an approach or a strategy at that time. So we had to make many thoughts about how do we organize this goal? How do we organize ourselves? What's our role in this whole process to go to open access? And I will take you through all of the details of that. So what we first did was we sort of mapped all publishers worldwide, and the red highlighted ones are those where we spend the most money. So if I take you to the next slide, you will find out that the 8 highlighted publishers are the 8 biggest publishers, and they account for 70% of all our spending on publications, on this dissemination of scholarly articles. So in our minds, if we would first focus on them and hopefully set a new default, probably the long tail of science would be able to follow, other publishers would be able to follow. That's one of the first aspects of our approach. Now, when we prepared for the first negotiations, we absolutely needed to know about the facts of publishing. Because sadly enough, publishers know more about ourselves than we do. And that's the situation. So if you're going to the negotiating table, and unlike the usual situation a university librarian would do, so we chose to have vice-chancellors, presidents of the universities involved. So they had to be prepared. It was a gift that in Germany, the Max Planck Digital Library made an excellent paper, a white paper, about the publishing business. So I will lead you through this picture, and I hope that we all understand the facts about publishing. So top left, you will see that in today's subscription reading access publishing system, 7.6 billion euros worldwide is spent on subscriptions. This is all about approximately 2 million scholarly articles. So divide the 7.6 billion by 2 million articles, and you will find out that in the current subscription system, we spend 3,800 euros per article. This is for the reading access, 3,800 euros. So that's what publishers earn in this business model. Now, if we go to the second half on the right side, on the bottom of the sheet, if you use a very, very conservative, meaning a very high price per article to publish in open access, you use this 2,000 euros. It's not the price that we would be willing to pay. It's not what we should pay, but for the purpose of this article, it was important to be conservative, so 2,000 euros. Multiply it by 2 million, and you will find out that there's 45% buffer in this publication system if we would live in an open access world. If everybody would embark on this open access and we would spend per article no more than 2,000 euros. These are the facts. But there are also the facts that are neglected by publishers. You cannot share on these facts. Although you can read annual reports, you will find out about the profit margins, but of course, business is business, right? So you cannot negotiate on these facts, but it's very important to know them. Because if you want open access and you have to do negotiations, you must be led by the facts. It's very important. Many researchers who know about it, so.
What is it for?
Sorry. If you multiply the 2,000 euro per article in open access publishing by the 2 million, we would spend 4 billion euros in an open access world. So compare the 7.6 to the 4.0, and you find out that there's 45% difference between spending in open access or in the subscription system. Yeah. And I think this is a great advantage, especially for the challenge that was mentioned in the introduction. There are countries who cannot even afford the current system of subscriptions. The open access world should be less expensive, much less. So I've prepared for you 2 more slides about the results. So I will take you from the official goals, our objectives, the facts, now to the results, and then I will go through the organization that we set up to reach these results. So we convey our negotiating results in a specific way. And for an example, I use the Elsevier contract, and it provides us, for instance, with 30% open access in 2018. So what does this mean, 30% open access? It means that in the current contract with Elsevier, we still have the right to read all articles. So not only the articles from Dutch corresponding authors, all articles. At the same time, we made this specific arrangement that from the annual contribution of Dutch corresponding authors, which is approximately 6,000 a year, 30%, so 1,800 articles can be published in open access. Meaning that even those who do not have a subscription contract, so the nurse, the teacher, everybody can read those articles for free. So that's how we convey the results. So first slide, we started in 2014. The first result came quite soon. So there was obviously a business opportunity for Springer to offer us a 2-year deal, and it provided us, without any exception, no limitation, on a fixed price, an open access big deal. So any Dutch corresponding author was able to publish in open access at no extra cost. It wouldn't cost them any of their research budget. They could just submit their article, and it was eligible for open access. At that time, we were still in a lot of debate with researchers, many of them arguing whether open access is good or bad. So we didn't know about the uptake of this contract. We had to find out in 2015 and 16, so the 2 years of this contract. So what we now know today about the official numbers clearly confirms that researchers want open access. I have to share some other numbers with you. From an historical perspective, we used to publish in all these Springer titles approximately 1,500 articles a year. When we had this contract with Springer in 2015, we saw an uptake to almost 2,000 articles. In 2016, we experienced 2,100 articles. So it's not a question if a researcher wants open access. Given all the pros and cons about open access, researchers obviously want open access. And there is a choice. There is a choice for the researcher to publish either in Elsevier or in a Wiley title or Springer, which is one of the explanations for this huge uptake. Luckily for us, we arranged a fixed price, so there was no calculation of the number of articles that we produced more than we did on a historical basis. So then we had the Sage publisher not providing us full open access for all authors. So what we had to do with them was to select a specific number of titles, provide the open access option in these titles, and they should match approximately 20% of all yearly articles from Dutch authors. So after a year, we had only 2 contracts, and all this time we were negotiating with Elsevier, with Wiley, etc. So it takes quite some time, at least when we started in 2014. Then in December 2015, we reached an agreement with Elsevier, also a partial deal, so not 100%, but it was in line with what government asked us to do, namely to go to open access 100% in 2020. Immediately after the Elsevier deal, Wiley followed, offered us a 4-year deal, 100% open access, no restrictions whatsoever. Then American Chemical Society, for us important because it was a societal publisher, and we didn't have any of them embarking on this open access journey until then. Then Taylor and Francis and Oxford University is a different chapter. I will talk about that later. So after 1.5 years, 2 years, we now have 6 of the 8 publishers where we focused on in an open access contract. 1 contract providing us the reading access and the open access publishing. Now, can you imagine the impact for us? When we started in 2014, there wasn't anyone who actually believed that we would achieve this official goal. And it's not easy to negotiate. Publishers, they hold the cards, they own the titles, so it's difficult to negotiate. You cannot say that if you do not get what you want, just to simply step out. We did explore this position with Elsevier, because we were for the second time in a deadlock after 1.5 year negotiations. And so I did this very small survey. Didn't give it very much publicity because it was important for the negotiations, but obviously you cannot do such a survey under radar. It was picked up by media. So the next day there were headlines in any newspaper in the Netherlands saying Dutch universities are going to boycott Elsevier. Now I remember this day because I was thinking this will probably be the last day that I've been working for the universities, but things turned out differently. Elsevier is, like any other publisher, is a shareholder-driven commercial organization. They will not go public. They will not debate publicly. So it all happens at the negotiating table. So what we can learn from this, if I summarize the results, which I have done on the next slide, you will find some interesting information. First of all, we have a contractual right in these 6 contracts, which will bring us from 2014, no open access at all, to 57% open access for Dutch Corresponding Office by 2018. The official goal is a 10% increase each year. So we have a very fantastic uptake, very good start. If we look at the cost, you might argue that it is more expensive to obtain open access. But the situation is that the current subscription model and the yearly price increase of that model is not any different than we have seen since today's open access deals. It is a problem. It has been mentioned during the introduction. And in fact, there is evidence from the Max Planck Digital Library that publishing shouldn't cost as much as it is today. But one step at a time, right? So first the open access and the reading access, and then later on we should go for lower prices. We do monitor the results and we can share it with you. On openaccess.nl you will find out all the details about the contracts, about the uptake, the number of articles that have been published at specific publishers, and you can also learn about the details of the contract, which is another chapter. What we want for Dutch universities is that we are able to share the details of the contracts, which is not very common business-wise. But we do think that we work for the benefit of science globally. So what we wanted was to share all the details about the contracts so that everybody can adopt them and try and bring them to the negotiating table. It wasn't easy because most of the contracts are signed under non-disclosure agreements terms. And so based on a Freedom of Information Act, any citizen with an interest in information about public organizations, which universities are, could obtain these contracts. So it has been very helpful for us that a former librarian requested for the information about the contracts. I was very voluntarily cooperating to publish this information. So it's open, it's freely for you to read and understand about it. Now if I look back at the 2.5 years that we've been working on open access in the Netherlands, I think there are 4 success factors that I need to address during this speech. The first one being that we formed one block in a unique bargaining model. So what we used to do when we negotiated on subscription access, we would have the library directors in place, they would negotiate with publishers. But they are the people who have been working on the contracts over the past 20, 30 years. We now think that we should never have let that happen. I mean, we're locked in a subscription model that we do not want. It's too expensive. Open access should be the standard. I mentioned the objectives. It's obviously, it should be open access. So what we did is that we had vice presidents, vice chancellors, directly at the negotiating table. And it has helped us because we sort of took it to a higher level. And what we also did, well, you know about the Netherlands, it's very small. I gave you an overview on the first slide. So this enabled us to be very closely connected. The General Assembly of the 14 research universities discuss open access every 6 weeks. So there's not a single person in the administration staff of universities who do not know about the current steps in the negotiations. And you have to, because you have to be aware about the power of globally acting publishers. They have immense relationships with researchers. So you have to stick together, which is what we did in the Netherlands, and it's one of the success factors. The other one is that we had a very powerful delegation to the negotiations, not only vice presidents, but on the background we also had former chancellors. We also have non-executive members, former non-executive members of publishers. We have many involved in these negotiations. And we keep politics updated very frequently. Because you will imagine what happens if you ask for open access and you have no extra money, which is the case for the Netherlands. Big publishers will go to the Ministry of Higher Education, they will go to the Prime Minister, they will go to the Ministry of Economic Affairs, explaining them about the rude attitude of universities asking for open access, not bringing in extra money. And then they will share their knowledge that they bring like 250 million euros tax money because they have an office in the Netherlands. You know the game, right? So you have to be prepared for it. You need a very powerful delegation, very high level. Libraries themselves cannot do this. So we have a set of principles that we use, and they're very basic. I've shared the facts about the publishing system, which is one. And then we keep repeating that we think it's absolutely normal to have open access and reading access in one contract. We do not believe in open access as a new business model. There's no extra cost. In fact, we all know that 90 to 95% of all the costs in this publication process is on account of universities. It's the researcher who writes the content. It's the researcher in the editorial board. So you have to keep this fact in mind, and you have to repeatedly explain to publishers that those are the principles and you're not going to step aside. In the case of Oxford University Press, I mentioned it, but I didn't go through the details of this negotiation. We've been negotiating with them for the third time over the past 2.5 years. So again, they didn't provide us with open access. Now, if you take yourself seriously in a negotiation, what would you do? You have to reconsider if you're going to have the same agreement renewed for the third time. And at this time we said, no, we're not going to do that. So we do not have the reading access directly from Oxford University Press. What will happen, do you think? You might expect that a lot of researchers, students, they will stand up, they will be angry, they will say, what are you thinking? You're closing our access. It's the core, it's the soul of research. What are you doing? But things are differently. And for me, that was the biggest wake up since I was working on this project. There's one solution to access, and it's called internet, right? There are so many alternative access to scholarly articles. The legal, but also the illegal ones. I have to mention it. Perhaps you have all heard about Sci-Hub. Of course, this is a fully illegal solution, but you cannot deny it. It's a social development. Researchers from all over the world contribute to this platform. They provide their account in order to have Sci-Hub download all the articles. If you look at the usage, and you can read it in articles in Nature, for instance, there are researchers all over the globe who use Sci-Hub to access the content. So since internet, content is not an issue. But obviously for a commercially driven organization, it takes time to give up their current business model, which is based on protecting the content. but business-wise this is not a sustainable model. So the fourth and last success factor is probably involvement of politics. This is our State Secretary Sander Dekker of Higher Education. It was actually on his account that we started Open Access in 2014. Open Access is much older, we knew about it, but he gave it a push. In 2014 he said, with publicly funded research, I want the outcome to be freely available to anyone. This statement was adopted by government, and ever since we closely collaborate with the ministry, with the State Secretary on open access, so we share all the steps in the negotiations. He is even available if we argue too much, if we tend to go to a next deadlock. He will be there to support us, to bring parties together, to reconsider our positions, etc. And he does a lot of publication monitoring, and he even, during the European Union presidency of the Netherlands in 2016, put it very high on the agenda. It was on his account that in 2016, open access was adopted by the European Union, by all 27 member states, to be a default for scholarly articles to be published by 2020. So clear political support is very, very useful. It's one of the success factors. I don't know about Malaysia discussing policy with government, but in our country it works this way. So Sander Dekker will tell us what he wants, but he will never tell you how to achieve it. So that's our position. I have to help him by explaining how we think we can achieve what he wants. So there's been a lot of misunderstanding about it. So people usually respond to politicians saying, okay, it's very clear what you want, but how are you going to achieve it? Well, that's our role. That's our responsibility. And I hope that in the previous slides you've seen that you can actually take this role, be responsible for this. So what I do now is basically travel around the globe, share my knowledge, and hopefully many more universities will embark on the open access journey. Because in the end, this will only work if all universities will adopt the policy. So what we do, what the Dutch universities do, is that they aim to share their experience. International collaboration is helpful. We've made some significant steps. We didn't achieve the end goal. We have to get there. We need you to get our own goal achieved. So one of the ways that you can embark on this journey is to join us at WWW08 2020. It's a worldwide initiative initiated by the Max Planck Gesellschaft in Germany. The Germans are doing a very fine job on open access as well. On the last Open Access Berlin conference, many countries joined, and they made very powerful statements about open access and how they would organize this. We need high-level adaptation of this policy. It's one of the ways, but you can choose your own, obviously. You have to take into account regional circumstances. But hopefully we'll meet in Germany one day. So I try to be as transparent about this as possible. I do have to write some articles on it. I haven't done so. If I find the time, when I'm not negotiating. But we do have some electronic magazines, they're freely available. You can read all about our policy, our goal, etc. There's a lot of contact information. We have newsletters on, which appear every 2 weeks. So you can join us to learn about our experience and probably when you're going to start open access, you will do much better than we did. So this will be the end of my presentation. I'm very happy that I could share this with you, and if there are any questions, please do ask. Thank you very much.